tuned into Fistphysics. My topic today, Oscar Delahoya, and why he's so mad about Conor McGregor Mayweather. Alright, so I think maybe about 2, 3 days ago, Oscar Delahoya, the owner and face of Golden Boy Promotions, released a statement via Facebook basically condemning Mayweather McGregor and trying to encourage fans not to buy it. Now, I do believe that De La Hoya's rant was brought on by a fear that Mayweather might try to step on their September 16th date for Canelo Triple G. And he has all rights to be upset about that because it would definitely stop Canelo Triple G from reaching its max potential. And De La Hoya, for some odd reason, feels like this fight would be a $3 million buy. I don't agree with him. I think currently the only fighter that Canelo could have got in the ring with that would have had 3 million buys or even come close to it would have been a Manny Pacquiao. But that fight is way off the table. I don't think you're ever going to see that fight. And it was a fight that once upon a time I thought would happen. And I actually thought that that's why they had Canelo hanging out at 154 for so long, trying to make a fight with Manny Pacquiao in Top Rank. But that ship has sailed. It's long gone. De La Hoya is trying to make a big move with the Canelo Triple G fight. So he's a little afraid. He's a little scared because he knows that if Mayweather McGregor jump on that date and he decides not to move the date, that this would jeopardize a maximum profit margin for Golden Boy. And honestly, right now, Golden Boy Promotion needs it. They've lost a lot of fighters. They've lost a lot of good people that worked for them over the past couple of years with just the boxing market expanding. Canelo is their only cash cow right now, and they need to hit their profit margin. I mean, I totally agree 100% with Oscar in that sort of realm of the statement. But now, being a follower, and once upon a time I was a big fan of MMA, mixed martial arts, UFC style types of events. But one thing made me very upset about the UFC. And this is why I'm not mad about McGregor Mayweather happening. Hopefully it does happen. And it's the fact that UFC has developed a habit of inviting professional boxers over to their realm, over to their rules and their fan base. And they built these fights on wanting to see who had the better hands, a martial artist or a professional boxer. Who has the better hands? Let's see it. That's how these fights were built. A few, for example, Razor Ruddock. I believe he came over once upon a time. James Toney came over. And there were a few other former champions, a little bit past their prime, that came over, tried to make some decent money. But now what happened when in these matches where the boxer met the mixed martial artist? I'll tell you exactly what happened. The mixed martial artist postures a little bit. He shoots in. He puts you in an ankle, a leg, toe lock, whatever it is. He gets you to submit rather quickly because he knows that you were almost completely defenseless as soon as you hit the ground. But wait, I thought the fights were built as who had the better hands. But these guys in the UFC, they didn't want to stand up with a professional boxer, especially with a guy that could punch, or a guy who had skill, or a guy who would come out there and make you look like a novice. They didn't want to do that, so they didn't really want to stand up with James Toney. They didn't really want to stand up with Razor Ruddock. They wanted an easy win over a boxer, and that's what they got. And now finally, you have a UFC guy who is not the A side, because remember too, like I just said, these were former champions past their prime. So they are not A level at that point. They are not marquee status at that point. The UFC fighter was. But now finally you have a marquee A fighter who wants to fight a UFC guy. And because he's the A side, he gets to dictate and control the situation. So bringing one of them over to the realm of boxing, I think is beautiful. I think it's beautiful for our sport. I think finally, and nobody's really even addressed this in even the building up and hype of this fight yet, but I think finally we will see who has the better hands. Because you know what? McGregor has a couple of different styles underneath his belt. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Judo, a couple other styles. But either way, he's a very well-rounded UFC fighter. Correct? Now, we have Mayweather, who only has one style, boxing. That's all he knows, boxing. And now we're going to have these two gentlemen mix it up. So who has the better technique as far as throwing a punch, throwing a hook? Because even though Conor McGregor is learning sort of, he's training boxing, in my opinion, it's really training for the stuff that's not allowed in modern day boxing. There's some slight variations of what you could do in the UFC with the smaller gloves that you cannot do legally in a boxing match. Okay, so that's going to take some adjustment. But I'm very interested in seeing how the mechanics of a martial artist is going to adapt to the mechanics of a professional boxer. And understand that everything Conor McGregor is learning currently, because he does have his boxing license, he has been sparring, he has been in the boxing gym, everything that he's learning right now is pretty much on a very basic level. Very basic. But also know this, because he's been fighting for so long using the styles that he's used, without being disqualified, I think a lot of the stuff that he's taught over the next several months will go out the window and be forgotten. And he will revert back to what he can do in the UFC, as long as it doesn't cross the line of a disqualification. So I don't see Conor McGregor jumping out there and like hammer fisting, because that's not allowed in boxing. So you can't hammer fist in boxing, but you can hammer fist in UFC. So he's not going to be jumping out there trying to hammer fist Mayweather to death, but this is going to be more about mechanics. And quite frankly, even though a lot of people are building the fight as Mayweather is just going to dominate him, you guys got to understand, until they negotiate this contract, then I'll be able to say for definite how competitive this matchup is going to be. Because, the rumors, and I'm a boxing guy. I stopped watching UFC, mixed martial arts, a long time ago. It was very predictable. I won some decent money back there, but I just didn't like what was going on with their industry, the low payouts for the fighters. I just didn't agree. UFC started absorbing all of these other really good mixed martial arts things that were going on, like Pride Fighters and Bellator, I believe they absorbed as well. So I really kind of lost interest in that. But now this is kind of bringing the interest back to me. And I do feel that Conor McGregor will have a chance until I know what the contract reads. Okay, so some of the things I'm actually throwing around in my head right now as I record this video is Conor McGregor has fought as heavy as 175 pounds. I'm not sure what that is in the UFC, but in the boxing world, that's a light heavyweight. So right there, we have a light heavyweight who's going to be facing a welterweight. which means the bigger guy is going to have a puncher's chance. Now, what else does Conor McGregor bring into the table? He's a lefty. He's a southpaw. So now you're going to be at an awkward angle and be the bigger man. Now, if Floyd is like, you know what? That's just too heavy for me, which is really not in Floyd to be like that, because all the catch weights except for one fight, he pretty much didn't stress a guy over what he rehydrated at, whatever. He didn't really, especially when you're talking about young Floyd, it really didn't matter to him. But now, what is going to be the agreed catch weight? Because you cannot have Conor McGregor walking in at 175, because now that's too much of a size and weight advantage, especially because you're coming from an awkward southpaw stance. Now, I do not feel like Conor will have the timing or the speed, or he really shouldn't, to really deal with a Floyd. But then again, you never know. I also realize that Floyd's genius is based on his knowledge of the mechanics involved in boxing. So he reads you. He can predict what you're going to do. He can actually even make you react how he wants you to open up the window of opportunity. But I'm wondering how he would fare against a guy who's bigger, might even be perceived as stronger, is coming at him with the southpaw stance. But here's going to be the critical key. If Conor McGregor comes in there with his very basic boxing knowledge and thinks he's going to mix it up with one of the greatest defensive fighters of all time, he's sadly mistaken. I think he should abandon everything and just adapt to whatever happens. Because if he goes in there with a game plan and he tries to fight a technical fight or tries to become a technician out there, he ends up like everybody else that's on Floyd's list. Floyd has a long list of punchers on his resume. And if you notice, Floyd has really shies away from the more technical boxers. Not like there was a whole bunch of technical fighters around during his era, but you really have to go digging deep into Floyd's resume to be like, no, this guy right here, he's a technician, man. He takes guys apart. And really, the last technician that Floyd fought, yeah, you could really say was Marquez. But Marquez was such a small guy at a blown up weight, he didn't have a chance. But as far as being super technically sound and very technical in how he operates, Marquez is a very high level, high IQ boxer. And you see what happens to a high level, high IQ boxer. You see what happens to a puncher. Now, there was one fight once upon a time that Floyd had, and in my opinion, this was the toughest fight of Floyd's career and the closest that he's ever come to losing, and that was against a guy named Chavez. Now that I dropped that, go back and look up Mayweather versus Chavez. Go back and look at that fight, not Roger Mayweather. Floyd Mayweather, Pretty Boy Floyd Mayweather Jr. versus Chavez, and I actually think the Chavez in question is a junior. But this Chavez threw 900 and something punches before he punched himself out. But when he did that, he forced Floyd to stay in a defensive shell. It was nothing Floyd could do. He would try to pop shots here and there, but the guy's volume was so high, you would have to open yourself up to a certain level of punishment, which Floyd has never wanted to do. So if Conor comes in there, he's the heavier guy, he's a southpaw, and he just goes for broke. He becomes a volume puncher in there. It might actually give Floyd a couple of competitive rounds. I'm not saying that he would beat Floyd, but he could possibly give Floyd a couple of good competitive rounds. Even make Floyd look kind of bad, maybe early in the fight, because Floyd usually gives you the first 4 rounds. So, I mean, we'll see, but stay tuned. I'm going to keep updating you guys about this Conor McGregor Mayweather and all the hate involved. But Oscar De La Hoya, I don't think a lot of people should look bad on him or say that he's throwing shade or he's being hateful. He's simply trying to preserve his investment, and everybody can understand that. And from a boxing fan's perspective, he is completely right. If you have a legitimate fight set for a certain date and you have something that's more of an epic event slash show, you shouldn't try to do these events on the same day. You really shouldn't. Because you're taking away money from the boxing population, you're taking away interest from the boxing population, and you're shifting it somewhere else. And boxing versus UFC is not something that goes down every weekend, so there are many people who would rather tune into that just for the spectacle of it. So, alright, fight fans, hit me in the comments section. Let me know how you feel about this. Oscar Delahoya stepping out and making some very, very hurtful comments towards Conor McGregor Mayweather happening on his date, which is actually Mexican Independence Day. How do you feel about that? Two non-Mexican fighters fighting it out on Mexican Independence Day in September 16th. I mean, at least in Canelo Triple G tells everybody, you know what, I have a Mexican style of fighting. And Canelo legitimately is from Mexico. So, I mean, shouldn't these two be fighting on an Independence Day that represents a country called Mexico? I don't know. Hit me up in the comment section. Let me know how you feel. All right. One.